Okay. Good morning, Outer Banks Association of Realtors. This is Donna Creef, your Government Affairs Director here with the latest edition of Let's Get Real. And this morning I have Jennifer Dixon from Goosehead Insurance with me this morning. And you know, we always like to talk a lot about insurance here at the Outer Banks Association of Realtors. And ironically, I had scheduled Jennifer to come in for the podcast when the federal government shutdown was still underway and to talk about the impact of that on flood insurance. Well, now the federal government is back open in business the past couple of days, but we have another issue to talk about, which is the latest dwelling rate increase that was filed by the Rate Bureau October 30th. And so we're going to chat about that a little bit this morning. So Jennifer, you're in insurance, you're on our Government Affairs Committee, and so we spend a lot of time talking about this. And I think there's always a lot of confusion about insurance, and every time we have a conversation, I seem to learn something new about it. And so, I think the big thing that we've been particular about putting out when we send out our calls for action, which our members share with their clients, and we share them with the local governments, is we've had to stress the distinction between a dwelling policy and a homeowner policy. So if you would just touch on that a little bit, because the other day in our government affairs we were talking about the DP1, the DP2, and the DP3. So just hit on that for a little bit, and then we'll talk about the rate increase.
So your DP1 is kind of a basic fire policy. It's going to cover your structure at actual cash value, which is much like getting into an auto accident. You purchase your car for $30,000, $40,000. You drive it a couple years, and then you've had a total vehicle. The insurance company comes in, the claims adjuster kind of breaks it down and says, well, this is depreciated in value.
Okay.
We're only going to give you X amount of dollars. That the DP1 is going to cover you in that type of scenario.
Just a real basic bare bones policy.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you step up to the DP2, which does allow for replacement cost value. So they're going to take into account that when the home was built in the 80s, lumber has significantly increased.
Yeah.
So they're still trying to replace you and indemnify you, make you whole again, and build that structure back to the same kind of quality. That policy does come with a few gaps in coverage. There's no liability coverage.
Okay.
So
which is a big difference between the dwelling and the homeowners, right? Okay.
Correct. Homeowners policy will give you some liability coverage. And the DP2, they do not. So out here, obviously, we have a lot of secondary short-term rental homes.
That liability coverage is
very
essential,
important.
yeah.
It's very important. You can pick up that liability coverage in a separate standalone policy, but it's going to come out of pocket. It won't be escrowed, and that's an additional cost to you. The second portion of that is that you have actual cash value on your contents. So again, you have that depreciation that's going to come in on your tables, your TVs, and your laptop.
Right. It's going to not make you whole again.
Right.
Like you said, something happens to your house.
The biggest gap that I find with the DP2 is there's no wind-driven rain coverage. So
which is a big deal here.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are very windy.
Wind-driven. Yeah, we're wind-driven here. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the moisture that the wind will blow into the home, under the windows, door jambs, underneath the shingles, behind the siding. There's no exterior damage to the home. It's just not covered. You're going to get mold. You're going to get moisture in the house. There's going to be significant damage from that.
Okay, that's an important distinction. Okay.
And then you can step up to the DP3, where you can get some of these coverages back, depending upon your carrier. They may cover your contents at replacement value versus the actual cash value. You will get wind-driven rain, and you will get that liability coverage. Okay. So, all of those will allow for your rental, to your short-term rental or long-term rental, really. So they're slightly step back from a homeowner's policy, which is why we try to write our clients with the homeowners. It's a broader span of coverage if you go in that route.
Right, but the dwelling policies are specifically designed for non-primary residents, right? So it is the rentals, be it a year-round or a short-term or your vacation home. And so I think that's why it's so impactful here for us on the Outer Banks, because we have so many vacation homes here. And we touched a little bit on this the other day in the Government Affairs Committee meeting. This latest increase is 2 years increases. 40.6% for Territory 110, 37.4 for Territory 130, and so that applied that 1 year and then applied the second year to
Correct.
whatever that increase was in the first year. So, you're looking at an 80% increase, but when you look at those base numbers, and I was looking at them this morning, the base rates for what's in territory 130 and 110, they're just so much higher than the other areas. And so we submitted a letter with comments on behalf of OBAR. I submitted that yesterday, and that was one of the things that we focused on, was the disproportionality of how our base amounts range. And I get the fact that we're in the coastal zone and that we have these risks, but it just seems there's just such an extreme separation there. A lot of the people that you deal with, your clients, are they non-resident property owners?
The vast majority of my clients.
And what are their comments generally about how the insurance is here in North Carolina compared to where they are? Do they have the same problems in their states, or do they just talk to you and say, Jennifer, my God, these rates are incredible? Yeah.
There is a heightened amount of sticker shock when they do see our premiums, yes.
Yeah, and so how do you talk them off of that ledge? I mean, what do you say to them? Do you just say, yeah, well, that's just North Carolina, we've got this narrowing market? Or, again, I understand that we're in the coastal areas, but it just seems just unreasonable to me.
It does. There is a long conversation that is had about our limited resources for carriers. We don't have a whole lot of carriers that want to insure out here. So we discuss that. We talk about reinsurance. We talk about the rate bureau itself and how it drives our market and dictates our pricing.
Right. And so thank you for sharing the comments that you submitted the other day. They were really good comments, and we hit on some of the same factors in the comments that we sent in on behalf of OBAR. And anybody who's listening to this, I encourage you to send in comments to the Department of Insurance before that deadline on November the 19th. And so let's just talk a little bit about that narrowing market that's occurring here on the Outer Banks in the last couple of years, particularly to the dwelling rate policies, or to the dwelling policies. Because you mentioned this the other day in our government affairs about the plumbing and the age of the roofs and all. So for some companies, that's a non-starter, correct?
Correct. Roofs over 20 to 25, depending upon the carrier, are no longer eligible. And then polybutylene plumbing is a very non-starter for most of the carriers. I do have two that may take it, but it really doesn't matter. The fittings, the year installed, if there is polybutylene plumbing in the home, it immediately makes it ineligible for coverage.
Yeah, and so the insurance companies are really cherry picking, and we've got the number of companies that have decreased. And so, I don't know what we do about that. We talk to the insurance commissioner, we implore him to be the advocate for us, but it just doesn't seem like there's any headway in that. And I understand that that this is going on in some of the other states too, in California with the fire, and and flood is a whole nother issue. But I just it's a pretty bleak future for us here on the Outer Banks, who are so heavily dependent on insurance, because if we don't have adequate insurance coverage, then our community can't recover when we do have that storm, and that's vitally important. And I stress that in the comments that we sent in for OBAR. And so sometimes I think that's lost in the messaging.
Agreed.
And that it's just not about the price of the insurance, it's the adequacy of the insurance. And so I think, and we stress this all the time, is that the most important thing that people can do is to reach out to their insurance agents and have that conversation every year when they renew their policy, so that they understand, because they have to be their own best advocate.
Absolutely.
And so, is there anything else that you want to add? We had such a good conversation the other day about the dwelling policies and all of that, and how the rate bureau, and I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, or lack of understanding about how the rate bureau works with the North Carolina Department of Insurance, because we're one of the few states in the country that have that elected official who works with the rate bureau, or has the rate bureau, correct?
Correct.
Typically, the insurance companies just file a rate and it's accepted with the state.
Yeah, well, the rate bureau is dictating it, and there is negotiation. The insurance commissioner does step in on our behalf and try to negotiate that rate down. But the rate bureau drives every rate across the board.
Yeah, yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens this time, because with the homeowners insurance rate increase last time, they started the hearing,
Yes.
but then they didn't finish it, and they went back to the negotiations, and that just seemed kind of strange that he would have denied it instead of negotiating it right in, and then they, because I was reading the transcripts, when they were having them, and they just kind of abruptly stopped having the hearings, and then he negotiated with it. So we'll see what happens this time.
I feel like the more people that get involved, the more that we reach out to our representatives and make our voices heard, it gives us a better stance to negotiate with that rate. And I just encourage people to write the letter, send the email, and
the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
and the thing that concerns me is that we have a homeowner rate increase, and then we have a dwelling rate increase, and so it's every other year. It's that I almost think that there's going to be consumers out there and policyholders and property owners that think, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna, I submitted comments last time and nothing happened, or it didn't have a positive effect. I'm just not gonna bother this time. I think there's this weariness that comes with all of the rate filings, but I think that is all the more reason for us to continue to be heavily involved in this, and we just can't let our guard down, because every time one of those rate filings come, we need to be submitting the comments, because it's just important to let them know that we're out there.
I could not agree.
Involved, yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about the dwelling policies, or anything else that pops into your head that you want to tell folks to advise their clients about?
I'm a huge advocate for education. I really strongly believe that insureds need to be educated as to what their policy is and is not going to cover. So I know the premium it's the leading factor of why clients decide to go with who they choose to, but they really do need to understand if there are gaps in coverage. So I encourage people, have a conversation. Please talk to a local representative, a local agent.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I get a client who brings me a policy and you see absurd deductibles on it or gaps in coverage. So education is key. Education is the way forward. Knowledge is power.
So when you say absurd deductibles, what do you mean by that?
5% wind and hail, not even named storm. We have different deductibles. So if you have a policy that someone hands you and there is maybe a $5,000 all other perils deductible, so that's think fire, busted water pipe, liability claims. That's not outrageous, but then you go over to the wind and hail side, any wind event, and you're footing 5% of the dwelling value. So that's going to hurt a client. That's not going to repair your roof. Yeah. Those take on more of self-insured homes.
Yeah. And because the deductibles, I think a lot of times that's what people do is that when they get that bill, they think, oh, well, I'm going to increase my deductible because that's going to lessen the bill, and it does.
It does.
But then it leaves themselves vulnerable to that gap in their exposure levels. And I think the other thing is that where we just went through our reevaluation here in Dare County last year, some people may just be renewing their insurance as a result of that reevaluation, so they want to make sure that they have that conversation and that they have that adequate level of coverage, be it a dwelling policy or a homeowner's policy. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing that people don't realize, is that you need to look at that value there, and not just the value on the home, but on the contents as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they just need to reach out and call you or call their insurance agent and have those conversations every year when their policy renews.
Every year, every other year. We saw a lot of homeowners who were underinsured after the COVID spike. So it is important to have that conversation frequently with your insurance agent.
Very good. Well, I think that's the message for the day, is be sure that you stay in contact with your insurance agent because they are a vital source of information. And
Absolutely.
Jennifer, thank you for coming
Thank you
in.
for having me.
And if we have you in every time we have a rate increase, then we'll probably be doing this again in another 6 months or so.
We'll see. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Thank you. That's the end of it for today.